project with the help of something called as automation. We actually, as a DevOps engineer, we are only thinking about this part. We are always thinking about how I can automate the things. But this is also a DevOps, guys. Lean is nothing but identifying the bottlenecks of the project and make sure that they are reduced or eliminated. Metrics is nothing, you have to measure the performance of the process which you are using, as well as the people who are working on this project. Their performance should be measured properly, and always you should have a sharing of the knowledge from one team to another team, or one person to another person. So if you have a proper setup like this one, if somebody asks you what is a DevOps is nothing but a combination of culture, automation, lean, metrics, and sharing. So please remember this. And as a DevOps engineer, we are only thinking about this automation, nothing else. But make sure that you also think about other aspects of the DevOps. And that is why if you see the symbol of the DevOps also, it is similar, something like this, right? So there's a plan, do, check, everything. Entire development life cycle comes. It is a repetitive test. So that I will try to see. Now, when we think about the automation, what are the things comes in your mind, guys? Whenever you think about the automation, that first thing comes in your mind, that where I will keep my code. That is called as the source code, right? कहाँ पे रखोगे इसको? So you need a version control system. So what are the different version control systems, guys? Do you know? Such as GitHub, right? GitLab, Azure Repos, and so on. There are so many version control systems are available. Once you maintain the source code inside this, right? What is the next thing comes in your mind? Yeah. Do you directly think about the building the code, or do you think about something called as a reviewing the code? Correct, na? Do you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
Scanning the code. Now this should, where should happen? Where this should happen, guys? Matlab, if the code is on the GitHub, where should the scan should happen? Is it another step which will you add inside the pipeline, so that you will use the sum tool to take the code and review the code? People might scan the code after building also. Okay, but before, if you review the code, scan the code, then only you can put it into the final branch, right? Do you agree with me? So your source code might be in the pre-production or development branch. Then you will review it, scan it, and then probably you will say that, oh, this is my final code. Let's put this into the something called as a production branch. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Correct. And once you have the scanned code, okay, once you have the scan code, right? Final code is there, then probably you will think about, let me now build this code, because my code is now verified. The code is now properly verified. So who will do the so before going to this place, after the reviewing the code, if you would like to deploy the code in the production branch, this is a branch, guys. So if you would like to deploy after the reviewing the scan, and if all the scan results are passed, if there is no vulnerability in the code, okay, if that scanning tool gives you the positive report, or maybe any positive report is nothing but that if there is some issue, right? Or if there is no issue, then it is a, you can say that it is a now passed, so that somebody will approve the score. So there should be approval step here. Okay, so unless and until code is not approved, so after the scanning, it should be approved and then the code should go into production. So this becomes your final code. So anytime here, if you find that there is some issue, then there should be some mechanism which should be, actually we should have something called as a review mechanism or feedback mechanism. So think about that. Now my code is in the dev branch and I started the scanning the tool using the scanning tool. Let's say it got some vulnerabilities. Now that vulnerabilities, how the developers will come to know that while doing the scanning, there is something, some vulnerabilities has been now identified. So how you will make sure that that has been gone back to the developer? What is your thought process, guys? क्या लगता है आपको? What do you think? What we should do?
सर क्वेश्चन परत रिपीट करा.
My question is that if something goes wrong here at the reviewing or scan code,
Okay.
you found that there is some vulnerability. So how the developer will come to know about it automatically? That is my question. I hope you got it right.
Yeah.
So before development, there is something called as project management tool, right? So you have to use a project management tool here, such as Jira or maybe Azure dashboards. Now, what this project management tool will help you to do that, right? It will help you to identify the number of tasks. Matlab, you can actually do the complete, what do you say, that you can create a product catalog, you can create the epics, you can create the task, you can create the issues, whatever it is required. So basically, whenever you would like to deploy any project or start any project, so you need to enter that data inside the project management tool, that this is my project, let's say project one. Inside that project, you have to tell that, okay, now this is my project, but inside this project, these many models are there. So that is called as a kind of these many models are there. Let's say I have a model one, model two, like this one, we have it multiple models. Inside that model, you have 100 small topics, right? You have 100 small tasks, right? You can say like that. So that is called as, I think, if I'm not wrong, it is something called as epic. Epic is nothing but, let's say, I'll tell you, there is a model called as employee management. Okay, in project name is employee management. So in the employee management, there is one model called as leave management. Another model is called as the payroll management. Another may be something else, right? Performance management or something like. So every model has a different attribute. So now let's say that there is a something called as a HR model is there. So inside that HR model, what will be there? That basic employee information. So in the employee information, if the employee is getting one page, you can say that I would like to develop one login page. So Epic can be your developer login page for the employee. And inside that, you'll write that, oh, now with the Facebook, with the employee ID, with the something else. Authentication might be something else, right? So there will be a lot of tasks involved in one model, guys, right? So what you can do, you can create under the Epic, you can create a multiple task and everything. Now this management is basically either you are using a Scrum or Kanban or something like that, right? Depending on that, your dashboard will get created. So this is called as actually a your backlog, product backlog. Project backlog or product backlog is nothing but how many tasks has to be completed. So once you feed that information that these are the models are there, these are the epics are there, these are the topics, these are the tasks are there, maybe subtasks are there, whatever it may be, right? So once you feed that information, you can say that in my sprint one, these many tasks should get completed. In my sprint two, this many tasks should get completed. Once that planner is ready, before actually development starts, you need to do this project management planning, right? And inside that, you have to create a complete picture of that particular project. And then you can define that sprint one will be from date 1 to 15, sprint two will be from 2 to 15 to 30, something like that, right? And then which task will be performed by which engineer has to be defined inside that particular um, planning project management team. So let us say that if developer one, if let's say that all there are 100 people who are working on the model one. In the model one, there might be a 300 task. Okay, and there are 100 people working on it. So everybody will have their own small branch, right, in their laptop, and from that they will push that code to the GitHub or some on the repository. So when they deploy when they push the final code on the specific repository, so at the end of the day, that all the code has to be merged to the dev branch. So before coming this code to the dev branch, there will be a lot of other branches. This is Pratik branch. This is something called as Mahendra branch, like this one. Developer 5, developer 7. These branches are there, and each developer, according to the task which is allocated by the project manager, that guy will push the code to this each branch. Are you getting it? This guy will push the code to the each branch. Is my voice loud and clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
ठीक है. Now, so once at the end of the day, if all the developers related to model one push the code to this particular branch, that is, this is called as a features branch or something like that, then this will be merged at the end of the day on the dev branch. So before merging also, you need to have approvals. So if you would like to deploy push the code finally on this one, make sure that your team leader or somebody is approving the code, and then only that code is getting merged. There is one more process before this one, right? That is called as the approval. Now, what I was trying to explain you that if there is some issue happen at the scanning, so if let's say that every model has a certain, every project has, or every model has certain commit ID. Okay, whenever you are pushing the code to the certain branch or something, let's say to the development branch, and then review and scanning started, then there will be one commit ID for that the scan will run. Okay, so when you are finally push the code to the dev branch, there will be commit ID, right, which we have seen in the GitHub. So once the commit ID is there, that will review the code for that particular commit ID. So if that commit ID fails, if that reviewing of that commit ID fails, then it will automatically send the message to the, we can add that into the reviewing or scanning code, that if there is some issues coming up, please send the message to this project management tool. So you can actually integrate the project management tool inside your CI/CD pipeline, so that if this gets failed here, or if you get some warning here or some message, immediately all the people who are working on that project or specific engineer who is working on that task will be alerted immediately, and that guy can start working on the issue. It can fix, and then again he can push the code to the branch. Finally, it will be merged, and then again the reviewing and scanning will be done. If there is no problem, then it will be passed, and then it will go for the further approvals, and then it will go to the your branch called as the production before it builds. So did you understood how many steps are involved before actually building starts? Does that make some sense?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Right, na? Okay. Okay, cool. Now, once this is done, guys, once your code is in the production, then what is the next thing that you are going to do? You have to build it, right? You have to take the code, build. Now, think about the situation. Why? What is the reason for building the code? Because we don't want to expose our source code, right? It is better to always create an object file. You do the compilation and have an object file created so that we can give only a code to the customer or on the production branch, on the production thing, right? So we need to build the code. So what are the stages? So now, guys, we are discussing about the very core concept of the CI/CD pipeline. What are the steps involved? What are the small things that you should take care of it, right? That is what I'm trying to explain you. Okay, so think about that. Now your code is ready. Now you want to build the code. So to build the code, what is required? You want to build the code, right? So what is required for that? What is the input for the building the code stage? You need a code. So let's say that you have code from this site. Now, what is the second thing? So you need an input as a code. Next, what is required? So if you are going to build the code, probably you need some Docker file, right? Or some tools to build that tool. So code के साथ build कैसे करोगे? You need a compiler. So if you have a Java code, you may use a Maven or you may use a Gradle. If you have C language, C++, Python language, you need to have that um, tools to be installed, right? So you need a code, you need a tools. So probably you will take a code and you may create a Docker file. And from that Docker file, you will run this Docker file to create an image. Or you may use a tool called as a Maven or Gradle. Inside, you can define in that Docker file also to create artifacts. So input to the build is you need a code, which you'll get from this branch. You need a tools, probably you'll write a Docker file for that. Okay, and you need a Docker file for that. So where you will execute all the build stage. It will not automatically do it, right? We need something to build it. So what you will do? You need a server to build this machine, guys. So people can use a virtual machine or people can use a container, but container also will run on the some virtual machine. So you need a infrastructure. So what is required? Input is required. One more requirement is infrastructure. So let's say that you have a Linux machine, and on the top of this Linux machine, what is required? You may require to install the Java or maybe some whatever the let's say if your source code is in Java, you may require to install the OpenJDK or whatever the software is required. If you have an npm, you have to install the npm here. So whatever the infrastructure you need before building it, how you will provision the infrastructure? So you can use something called as a Terraform, which you have learned. If you want to configure that infrastructure, you will use an Ansible. So before the build stage actually gets executed, you need to add one stage or two stages of provisioning the infrastructure, and second one is a configuring the infrastructure. Correct, guys? So once you provision the infrastructure and configure the infrastructure, like you have a virtual machine required, you have the software installed on top of that, then you can run the build step on the infrastructure. So developing the infrastructure is important. This is additional step when you would like to take the code from your maybe a dev branch or maybe your some other branch or maybe you're from the production branch before it builds it, right? Now, so not only configuration, provisioning the infrastructure and configuration is required on this before the build stage happens. You need something called as a security as well. Because when data is moving from branch which is available on the GitHub or maybe your Azure repos or maybe or your internal servers, maybe on your on-premises server, right? So that is a repository where which is now available, or maybe on that production from that branch, you would like to bring the code to the server or virtual machine which is created on maybe on Azure, maybe on the AWS, maybe on your on-premises setup. So you will not use the GitHub servers to build the code. You will use your own servers to build the code. So there is a transmission of data from this to this servers, right? So when there is a transmission of data from one place to another place, from one server to another server, you need to make sure that that data which is in the transmission, which should be encrypted format. So when data is in transit, we have to have the encryption in place. Does that make some sense, guys? What else you can add whenever you would like? So basically, देखो कैसा कभी भी whenever you would like to build the stage, right? So it's important that my code is coming from one place to the another place. So where it is going to execute, we need a server. We need a software on that one to build the code. And then once the code is built, what is the output of this build stage? So you need to store whatever the artifacts or images gets created, right? Artifacts or images. Whatever the output is there, that output should be stored on some repository. 1 minute, guys. Huh? Okay, so whenever the build stage is completed, the build stage will have some output called as images or artifacts or some reports, whatever it may be. Now you want to store that somewhere. So as I told you, for the project management tool, you may use Azure Dashboards or Jira board. For source code management, you may use something called as GitHub or something. For the reviewing or scanning code, you can use the GitHub's internal tool, or you can use the SonarQube, or maybe some other native tools of the application infrastructure service provider. And then that code will come to the production branch I'm saying. So there is environment is nothing but what? What is the environment? We are saying that normally we say in the DevOps that my code is now in the development phase, then testing phase, or then we say that now it is in the UAT. But what exactly is the meaning of that? The meaning of that is nothing but my code is in one branch, which is the developer branch. My code is in the UAT branch, which is my, let's say, UAT branch. My code is in the production branch, which is my prod branch. So the moment you are moving the code from one place to another place, you can also create the infrastructure along with that. Sometimes you don't require that much, because what is happening, this artifactory concept has now made the life easier, right? But if at all you would like to have some additional code to be added, when your artifact repository is created, you can create a different repository as well. So what is this repository, guys? Artifactory repository. Like you have a JFrog. If you have just only image, Docker image or something like that, you can use the Docker Hub, or you can use the Azure repos, right? Or maybe many things are there, but very famous are JFrog, Azure repos, AWS repos. These are the very famous repositories available. So now your after the build, your now code is available, or compiled code is available on the some external repository, right? So now by using this particular thing, we have not yet tested it, right? We have just built it. So now we can test this application because we have a compiled code. Now we can launch the application. And when we launch the application, what is required? When I say that I would like to give the code for testing, what exactly you give for the testing team? आप टेस्टिंग टीम को क्या देते हो जब कोड टेस्ट करना होता है? तो do you give the source code to them? Yes. Do we give them a source code? No, right? What we give them? We give them a running website, running database to test it. So you don't have to do the building and everything process again when we are giving to the test team. So what we can do, let's say this next cycle is a test. So if you want to, now we have a JFrog, right? Or the repository is there. Now you have to pull this code. You have to clone the code here. So what is the input to the test team? Test is, what is the input? Input is what is the first thing that you will add? Artifacts tree, artifact repository. Now this has to be also run on some server, right? So you need an infrastructure team. So if you don't want mix your build and testing infrastructure, you can create one more infrastructure, guys. In case you don't want to use your build infrastructure, you can use it. You can create a test infrastructure, separate test infrastructure, along with the security concepts. Because when your code is moving from the JFrog to the your test infrastructure, make sure that there is a proper TLS and SSL certificate in place, so that there is no man in middle attack, or there should not be any other issues. Okay, so if this is my test environment, so what you are going to do, guys, you are going to create a infrastructure for that. You are going to configure the infrastructure, then you will pull the code. Now, is this particular step is manual step, or is it automated test? Which one? Testing of the software product. How you would like to achieve this particular test? आप क्या करोगे ताकि आपका टेस्ट मैनुअल तो होगा नहीं, right? Nowadays people are not using a manual testing, they're using automation testing. So what exactly you will do at this particular stage, guys, as a testing team? Tell me, Pratik and Mahendra, what you will do to do the automation testing. Are you getting my question?
Yes, sir.
क्या करोगे आप? टेस्टिंग कैसे करोगे? ऑटोमेशन टेस्टिंग कैसे करोगे?
Sir, sonar cube.
सोनार क्यूब, ओके. Sonar cube, will it do the functional testing?
Sir, I don't know about that.
Sonar cube will not be able to do the functional testing.
Okay.
Okay, Sonar cube will try to find out the review the code, whether all the aspects of the code is properly maintained, whether the syntax is proper or not, whether there is any, if there is any SQL injection is happening, whether it is going to protect any VAPT test it will run. It is not going to test your functionality. So when you have to test the functionality without the human beings, you have to write the code. So whenever you create a project, right? Whenever you develop a project, you have to write the test cases inside that project itself. Okay, so if the function is whether it is a mobile number, if there is a text field is there, and it should be mobile number. So what you will do, you will write a program to check whether it is mobile number numeric hai ya character. So you'll create a code for that. You will create a test case for that. You'll write a source code for that, and you will create a one module called as a testing model inside the project, and you will inculcate that particular model inside entire project. So whenever you get that artifact from this one, here that execution of the test command will happen. If you have formula to check the some calculations, if you need to write a code whether it is a Gmail ID or whether it is a Yahoo ID, what is the login ID, it will check the database. So before deploying that, right, in the production or UAT, it will check whether all the functions which you want to check, you can write a code for that. You can create a test cases, write the code and include as a test project inside your main project. That is where this your Selenium or other tools are now doing a wonderful job. So please note down that in the automation, basically in the automation, so it's very essential to understand that, guys, develop testers are not there to test it. So the tool, the software which you are writing for your customer, in that same software you have to write the test functionalities so that it will test it. Now once the test cycle is completed, what will be the output of the test cycle? What is the output you would like to check for the testing? Of course, this approval will come here also, guys. Everywhere this approval will be in place. So before test, you have to have an approval. So what will be the output of the test cases? So there is a report generated that is called as a coverage report. You can definitely delay the cycle, right? Till the time you find that coverage report has to be analyzed. Okay, now that coverage report analysis also can be automated. What is the coverage report? Is nothing but that how many cases were there? 100. How many cases run now executed? Let's say all. How many of them are success? All. How many of them are fail? 0. Then next step will get executed. But 100 cases are there. But out of that 100 executed, but 99 got succeeded, 1 failed. Now that will come into the report, and that report will be sent to the to whom? This through this project management team. Project management team will come to know that the task person, who developer who is working on that task, will come to know that there is a issue with the test, this particular one test. Then that guy will start analyzing it manually, and then it can fix. Now, if the this particular the sum of the test cases can be fixed automatically, right? That much you can do it. But if it requires a human intervention, yes, then the person who is there will pick up the case, will study it, analyze it, fix it, and it will push the code again to the its feature branches. So this, I hope you got it right. Did you got it up to this particular point? What exactly I'm trying to explain?
Yes.
तो थोड़ा बहुत steps होते हैं इसके अंदर, and you have to write down the what are the steps I am going to perform when my code is getting pushed to the development branch. What are the steps I'm going to do when it is going to do the scanning? What are the steps I should follow when the code is in the now some other branch for the production final code is there? What are the steps should do when the build process should happen? What are the steps I should follow when there is a test process is happening? And this is something which is once your testing is completed, then you can say that the image which has been now available at this repository or artifacts which is available in this repository are 100% secure, 100% functionally working. Okay, and then only that can be given to the next stage. So the process of pushing the code and building the code is called as integration. This is called as an integration. Now, since this is happening continuously, that's why it is called as a continuous integration. Hope you got the meaning of this, right? That is called as a CI. Any other step which I am missing here? No, image which is created now here, right? If there is image here or artifacts here, again you can run the scanning on it. So this step can be again executed here. Scan the images. Vulnerability assessment test. So this comes under the security. So once it is built, because when it is building, it may take the some other dependencies, some other things from the internet or some other repositories. It can also have some vulnerabilities issues, right? So before you proceed further, you can use the security tools to check the VAPT, do the VAPT analysis, and if there is any vulnerability, if there is any penetration happening, send that code back to the or that particular issue back to the developers through project management tool. So whatever till now we have learned, like a GitHub, Linux, or maybe Ansible, Terraform, or Docker, Kubernetes, where it is going to be useful here. So source code management tool is GitHub. Probably whatever we have learned about the Docker file and everything that comes here while building the code. Now this can be one of my Kubernetes cluster, one of my Kubernetes pod on which I am deploying my test, or might be this is one of my container which is deployed in the Kubernetes inside the pod, and that is running as my UAT or maybe pre-production or production. Okay, so we need to create infrastructure to run this all the development life cycle, all this code, right? Build the code, you need infrastructure. To test the code, you need infrastructure. For the UAT purpose, you need infrastructure, right? All that things come under the CI pipeline too. So guys, do you have any question on whatever the topics I have discussed till now? Anything that comes in your mind?
सर ये पूरा काम डेवऑप्स इंजीनियरिंग करता है कि टीम होती है?
ये ना
हाँ सर।
ये देख कितने मॉडल्स हैं इसके अंदर ना, तो बेसिकली ये टीम होती है पूरी, एक एक बंदा नहीं कर सकता इतना सब। ये बंदा कौन करता है? ये जो डिजाइनिंग करता है ना, उस करता है, उसको बोलते हैं सोल्यूशन आर्किटेक्ट। I could have directly take you took you I could have taken it directly to the Azure DevOps and create one pipeline and finish the session. I want you to understand this one. If you understand this one, then you can become a solution architect, DevOps solution architect. Pipeline architect only will be able to give this analysis that कि भाई ये रिव्यूइंग टूल यूज करो, ये अप्रूवल यूज करो, इधर जाओ, ऐसा करो, ये सिक्योरिटी यूज करो। ये डायग्राम तो जरूरी है ना,
यस सर।
राइट? और यहाँ पे कौन सा कॉन्फ़िगरेशन आएगा, उसके लिए प्रोजेक्ट टीम से इनपुट लोगे, आप एप्लीकेशन टीम से इनपुट लोगे, कितना सीपीयू देना है, कितना रैम देना है, वो सब आएगा उसमें। व्हिच डेटाबेस हैज टू बी यूज्ड, so that comes under the project specification document, and when you deploy it, you have to create a pipeline out of it, right? What are the tasks are there, and then you have to create a pipeline, but that for that purpose you have to design the pipeline, because क्यों pipeline designing करना पड़ता है? Because the important thing is that your source code might be on the GitHub. Okay, you are building the code might be on the AWS, then you are testing the code might be on the Azure, right? It can, infrastructure can be anything, or maybe you have a Kubernetes cluster on which you have to deploy finally, which is on the GCP. So infrastructure can be anywhere. When you are moving the infrastructure, it is important that approval stages, scanning stages, security stage is also considered. Without that one, it may, see, pipeline takes time to execute. It is not like that pipeline can get executed in 1 minute or 2 minutes. It may take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on the how many cycles are there, how many approvals are there, how many scanning tools are there. Because
सर
before going,
जेनकिंस कहाँ यूज होता है इसमें?
hmm,
जेनकिंस कहाँ यूज होता है इसमें सर?
तो ये जो टास्क है कंटिन्यूस इंटीग्रेशन का, कितने टास्क मैंने आपको बताया अभी? ये सोर्स कोड लेगा, ओके, उसके बाद वो स्कैन करेगा, उसके बाद वो बिल्ड करेगा, लेकिन कौन कर, ये जो टास्क है कहाँ पे डिफाइन करोगे आप? सो देयर इज अ,
जेनकिंस में।
जेनकिंस में करते हैं। सो जेनकिंस इज इंटीग्रेशन टूल। What are the other tools which are available in the, because I want to deploy this task, I want to define this task in some platform, and that is called as the integration tools, like such as Jenkins. Another one is Azure pipelines, GitHub Actions, और क्या होता है? Harness, AWS pipeline, अरे ऐसे बहुत सारी चीजें। Jenkins is one of them. I hope you got it right.
यस सर यस।
And we have to do this map practically. That is what thing is that. But before going to the practical stuff, why we need to learn this one, that is what I'm trying to explain. What are the factors, best practices you should consider while creating the CI pipeline? Okay, so guys, now I'll just pause the session for some time. So now you see here, in our training program, we have what we are going to learn, guys, is Azure pipelines now, right? So whatever the CI I have just discussed is also called as a build pipeline. And there is one more word called as a release pipeline. So that comes under the deployment section or delivery section. Is called as a release pipeline. Now, what is the input from input required for the release pipeline. So what CI pipeline is going to give you the working registry, tested image or artifacts, working, tested, scanned, whatever the name you give, image or artifacts. What is the difference between image and artifacts? Can anybody tell me? हाँ, आपके क्या आता है दिमाग में आर्टिफैक्ट्स और इमेज के बारे में? प्रतीक, महेंद्र?
सर आर्टिफॅक्ट्स म्हणजे रेपो ना?
Repo stores the artifacts and images.
ओके.
But what is image and artifact? Image, you know that, right? Docker file में हम लोगों ने image
Yes.
देखा है, which is a one file. But artifacts can be a other than image like war file, jar file, or maybe image. Combination of some of the source code produces the output which is war file, jar file, or some files. So artifact is nothing but it can be image or it can be image plus other format of the compiled format of the source code. Okay, that we can store in the artifacts like JFrog artifacts or maybe your Bitbucket. Bitbucket is the source code only, but you can store it into the AWS repos or Azure repos. That is all artifacts, guys. So please remember that image or artifacts, matlab combination of image plus files, or file, jar files, whatever it may be, is called as artifacts. So that is the input to the release pipeline. So it is also called as CD pipeline. Like build pipeline is called as CI pipeline, release pipeline is called as also CD pipeline, right? Like a continuous delivery and deployment. So what are the steps comes into this particular pipeline? That you take the code, maybe deploy it on the UAT environment, maybe deploy on the pre-production environment, or maybe deploy it on the finally deploy on the production environment. Now, when we are moving the code from one stage to another stage, make sure that you have all these things in place, like approval, you have these things, security, everything is in place whenever you are doing UAT or whenever you are doing pre-production or when you are doing production activity. So these steps will be always there, guys. And then you can test it right at the end of this one that, oh, my production is working fine, it's good. So now you can create a build pipeline, you can create a release pipeline, and then you can set up the triggers which can automatically run the pipeline. So here also we need to create a UAT environment. So we have to use something called as a Terraform for provisioning and Ansible or some other tool for configuration of it. Similarly for pre-production, because every infrastructure may be a different infrastructure, right? So that is what we need to do. So this is your complete build pipeline and release pipeline, friends. So release pipeline is quite easy. It is not difficult at all. Only thing that you need to remember is that when this release pipeline should get triggered, when there is a change in the image or artifacts, when this build pipeline should get triggered, when there is a change in the source code. The moment you find the change in the source code, run this pipeline. The moment you see the change in these artifact trees or images, then run the release pipeline. That is what triggers are. Trigger is nothing but it is an event which after that some steps of the executions will happen is nothing but trigger. So when we can say that if you push the code in the master branch, then execute this pipeline. If there is a change in the version of the image, then run this pipeline. So that is called as trigger. So we are going to see all the things in practically as well. This is what I wanted to explain you about the concept of what is build pipeline and release pipeline. I think I hope you got something out of it, guys. Do you have any questions before going to the practical stuff? काही क्वेश्चन असतील तर विचारा रे. ठीक है?
ओके सर.
Sure, everyone? All right. So now we know this particular thing, right? If you go to the portal.azure.com, this is my cloud infrastructure of the Azure.